The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome back. As our virtual announcer said, I'm Chris Temple, and today we're going to take a deep dive once again into energy fuels. Energy fuels is listed on the Toronto Exchange under the symbol EFR. Here in the US, it is listed, easy to remember symbol, 4 U's in a row, on a New York Stock Exchange, Amex or ARCA, whichever you prefer to call it. Energy Fuels is a company that's been on my list for quite a number of years. We went through a lot of lean times together, with this being primarily, at least back in those days, a uranium story. Still a big uranium story, but as you're going to learn, it's much, much more than that. And we'll get into that as we go along, particularly when I bring on the company's vice president, my longtime friend Curtis Moore. Before we do that, a couple of the usual preliminaries. First of all, as you see here, Curtis and or myself may be making some forward-looking statements as we go along, so be aware of that. Secondly, though Energy Fuels never paid for any recommendation of mine to our paid members at the National Investor, they have from time to time paid us to do media work, copywriting, and whatnot, of which this video is a part. So we are compensated to do things like this as kind of an add-on to our recommendation of the company in the National Investor. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, Energy Fuels was always, and still is in many people's minds, chiefly a uranium story, and you'll be learning that it still is, if not the biggest, one of the biggest uranium producers in the U.S. going forward, and with a few others that are big players ramping up a lot, as we're seeing more and more domestic demand for uranium because of the attempt to get us off of foreign sources, especially from Russia and Kazakhstan, et cetera, et cetera. You may have heard about some of that in the news. But what a lot of people have not kept up with is the fact that Energy Fuels has become a much more diverse company. Their White Mesa mill out in the western U.S. has a distinction of not only being the only conventional uranium mill in a country for hard rock-based uranium, but it also can work to process rare earth elements. And that, as you're going to learn from Curtis, has opened up a whole new series of opportunities for the company to grow and to stake its claim as being a major processor of rare earth oxides here in our part of the world, and in a market which, like so many other things, has to date been dominated by China. Now, before I bring Curtis on, I want to talk about a few of these other things. You know, we've got uranium, we've got rare earths, we've got vanadium, which is a steel alloy that the company's long produced. You're going to hear a really cool story about what could be the icing on the cake for all of this, and that is the company's ability, perhaps down the road, to recover very carefully, as you'll hear, radioisotopes, chiefly radium, for the medical field, which could be an astonishing benefit to the medical community and to mankind, and also a major new source of cash if it all works out for the company. What I want to do now, though, before I bring Curtis on, is they have put together themselves, the company, perhaps the best and most comprehensive introductory video of their own of any company I've ever seen do this kind of thing. And so for at least part of our time today, rather than either one of us reinventing the wheel, I want to share this with you. It's just over 9 minutes that gives you all of the whys and wherefores of Energy Fuels, how diverse the company is, what they're doing, and again, this is extraordinarily well put together. After that, I'll bring Curtis on. We'll fill in some of the blanks, talk about what things look like going forward, and frankly, all the reasons why I think that, notwithstanding the fact that our members have already made several times their money in the last few years on Energy Fuels. I think the company's best days are still ahead of it. So sit tight for this. You're going to love this.
Energy is such an important part of our everyday lives. Without access to clean, affordable electricity and energy, you can't have the modern society that we have today. From electric vehicles to renewable energy to advanced computers, those technologies require the raw materials that we produce here at Energy Fuels.
Energy drives just about everything. When you look at the various sources of energy, you really have to come up with the mix that fits the location. And nuclear is about 20% of the power grid in the United States. The key with nuclear power right now is this focus on reducing carbon emission.
It's going to play a major role in solving the climate change problem. It's our largest source of carbon-free, emission-free electricity. It's also particularly important because it's baseload. It provides electricity 24/7, 365, no matter what the weather is doing and no matter what the sun is doing.
There were natural formations of uranium all over the Four Corners region. And when the U.S. government decided they needed uranium, well, that's where the prospectors went. And that was really the beginning of the nuclear age for the nuclear fuel cycle.
The uranium industry has really evolved over the last 50, 60, 70 years. In the early days, it was essentially a government-sponsored defense program. It was very lightly regulated. We didn't have a great understanding of a lot of the health impacts, the environmental impacts that could come from uranium mining. But a lot has changed over the last 70 years. Today's industry is extremely responsible. We've got a great record of environmental protection, regulatory compliance, worker safety. That's probably the biggest misconception that people have. People think things haven't changed in the last 70 years. Well, I'm here to tell you they have.
Our company has the ability to do more than any other company I know to decarbonize and improve electrification.
Nuclear is seeing a real renaissance within the United States. We're moving into advanced reactor technologies and small modular reactors, and all of those are going to need uranium for their fuel. Energy Fuels produces the raw materials that make many clean energy technologies possible. Uranium is the fuel for clean nuclear energy. Rare earth elements are the building blocks for a lot of clean energy technologies like electric vehicles, wind energy, batteries. We also produce vanadium, which is primarily used in steel, but it's also seeing a lot of interest in high-capacity grid-scale battery technologies. So Energy Fuels has an extremely unique role to play in this clean energy transition that we're in the midst of today. The Pinyon Plain mine was discovered in the 1970s. It's a really good uranium deposit.
We have over 2 million pounds of uranium within the Pinyon Plain mine ore body. That uranium is enough to power the entire state of Arizona for over a year, purely on carbon-free green energy.
It has the equivalent amount of energy as would be contained in a train that had coal that stretched from Los Angeles all the way to New York and part of the way back again. The amount of electricity contained on this small 14-acre site of land is quite extraordinary.
You're not going to have a green world without mining.
The home you live in, the wallboards, the roads that you just drove on, every time you see a cement truck drive by, this is all product of mining.
Everything you see around you, all of that was either mined or it was grown. So there is no getting around the need for mining. It can be done certainly in much more responsible and much cleaner ways than it's been done in the past, and we are constantly working to make that happen.
I take the responsibility to the land and the people very seriously. We do things right. We do things at high standards.
The life cycle of a uranium mine is that the deposit is discovered, then you have to go through and you have to permit that deposit for production. And that is a lengthy, multi-year process through a whole host of federal and state agencies. Once it's in production, you mine until the deposit is depleted. And then once you're done mining, then you go into reclamation. And this is one of the huge differences between how mining is done today versus how it was done in the past. We have to go through and ensure that there's nothing left on the surface that would indicate that a mine operated there. You have to re-contour the land and you have to revegetate it, and then you have a lot of post-mining monitoring that has to happen to ensure that there's not something that pops up down the road.
But once post-closure period is complete, we'll be able to return this land back to its former use, and the public would be able to enjoy and recreate here and not know that this land was ever even operating as a mine.
The White Mesa Mill is what's known as a conventional uranium mill. This is where ore from mines or other sources was processed and where the uranium is extracted and the impurities removed. We're also applying those same technologies and those same practices to the extraction of rare earth elements. There are rare earth element bearing ores that are mined around the world, and nearly all of them are mildly radioactive because they contain small quantities of uranium and thorium and other radionuclides. And those have to be removed from that ore before those rare earths can be sent on for further processing. And so that's why the White Mesa Mill is such an important piece of the rare earth supply chain here in the United States. There is truly no other facility anywhere in North America like the White Mesa Mill with the capabilities, the licenses, and the expertise that we have at that facility.
I've worked here for 10 years, and I stayed here that long because I love the area, and it's about the best job in the area.
I grew up on the reservation, and then I moved up here to Blanding. So there's a lot of people in our county that have worked here. That means a lot to our county.
For me, it's pretty much home. Most of the guys that I work here is like family to me.
We have a team of people down at the White Mesa Mill that I just cannot speak more highly of. They are professional, they are knowledgeable, they are committed to safety and environmental protection. It's a great team that we have both at the mill and also throughout the entire company.
We try to do things right, not only environmentally, but also safety-wise. The last thing anybody wants to do is get hurt and not go home.
We take great pride in ensuring that everything that comes to the mill stays at the mill, and everything that leaves is something that we allow to leave. We monitor our tailing on a daily basis to make sure that we are taking care of the environment and the people who live here.
Our company is made up of a lot of people, and I want them to feel that they're part of something that is extraordinary. Uranium's been around for a while, and that's what we've done for a long time. But when you look at like the rare earth elements for the high efficiency electric motors, like neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, terbium, those are elements that assist in making the most powerful magnets that use the least amount of energy to propel things. That's the new part of this space, and this is the exciting part of it.
Energy Fuels is focused on a particular mineral called monazite, and monazite is extremely important when it comes to rare earth element production because it's very high in the particular rare earths you need for electric vehicles and wind energy in particular. But the problem for most companies is that monazite is mildly radioactive. You need special licenses, you need special capabilities and special expertise in order to process the monazite, extract the uranium and other radionuclides, and also extract the rare earth elements and send those down for further processing on the rare earth supply chain. And the White Mesa Mill in Utah is the only facility in the United States capable of performing that role.
The newest thing on the table for our company is looking at these isotopes that are now the focus of some modern cancer treatments. When you look at these new technologies that are in for approval by the FDA, they're more powerful, they're more selective, they do less damage.
This industry is fascinating. There is never a dull moment. The challenges are constant, but they're exciting, and it's exciting to try to overcome some of those challenges.
Right now we rely on international sources for the uranium, and we hope to be a major supplier of domestically produced uranium.
We're trying to restore that processing technology and the ability to produce these advanced rare earth materials here in the United States.
Our goal is to reshore these critical elements in the United States of America, reduce dependence on Russia and China, and at the same time, do this responsibly at the highest standards possible. We want to do extraordinary things.
And here I am joined by Curtis Moore, my old friend, who's the Vice President of Energy Fuels. Curtis, welcome. Good to see you.
Great to see you too, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
You know, as I alluded to in the intro, it seems like we were in the wilderness for a long time, years past. We had the bear market in uranium, things were pretty quiet, it was hard to get anybody's interest. And now we've gone from famine to, I guess, a relative feast. At the least, you guys have done very well. You've built a great company. You've added to it, as your great video that we showed before you came on indicated. But I want to start where the company's core story has been in the past, of course, and that being uranium. Even though a lot of people, and I think we'll help to disabuse some of that today, are confused. Well, what is Energy Fuels doing now? Are you rare earths? Are you this? Are you that? You're still going to be, if not the biggest, one of the biggest uranium producers in the U.S. going forward, aren't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I do think that is, that this has created a little bit of confusion among some people out there, possibly. But yes, we're ramping up uranium production as we speak right now. We've been the largest uranium producer over the last 6 or 7 years. Now, that's been a bit of a consolation prize because the U.S. has not produced a lot of uranium, but to the extent the U.S. has been producing uranium, it's been us. And that's been really important because it's allowed us to keep our facilities operating. It's allowed us to keep our people together and our core competencies together. So I think we're in a really great position to ramp up our production. We expect to be producing uranium at a run rate of about 1.1 to 1.4 million pounds by the end of this year, and hopefully ramping up to a run rate of 2 million pounds by 2025. So I think we'll maintain our position as the largest uranium producer in the U.S., if not one of the top two. And it remains a core priority for us, for sure.
Now, importantly, that production is going to come from a few different places. You're not a one-trick pony. You've got several different projects, including, and this has always been one of the big feathers in your cap that transcends uranium, and that is the White Mesa Mill, which is the only conventional mill in the country that can do that. Explain for folks that get confused with some of these terms, Curtis, real quick, and then maybe go into where the pecking order of what's producing and what's going to be coming online as there's a greater demand for the uranium that you have. Tell us the difference between conventional ore and the mill that you have at White Mesa and common practice of ISR mining. And you do that as well, but
yeah, absolutely.
Distinguish the two.
Yeah, we do both. So there are two main ways to produce uranium. The first is conventional methods, and the other is called in situ recovery, or ISR. Conventional mining and milling is what most people think about when you think about mining, where you have a mine and you remove the rock that has the metal you're trying to recover. In our case, of course, it's uranium and vanadium in some cases. And then that rock is processed at a mill where you extract the metals and you purify and refine that, and you dispose of the waste that comes off of that. In situ recovery is basically in place solution mining. You need a certain type of deposit to perform ISR mining. You have a series of injection wells and production wells where you're pulling uranium that is solubilized in place, and then it goes back to a plant where that uranium is recovered. Around the world, roughly half of the uranium is recovered using conventional methods, and about half is performed using ISR methods. Most of the ISR in the United States uses an alkaline process, but in places like Kazakhstan, they use an acid process. There's positives and negatives to both. We have both within our portfolio, but we are, I think, in a very unique position because we do, as you point out, have the only conventional uranium mill in the U.S. So that's operating or has operated in any capacity in the last 40 years. And basically, that means that if anybody has a conventional mine that produces ore, they basically need to come to us to have it processed, either through toll processing or where we would just buy their ore based on prices at the time and quantities and grades and all that. So
Sure. Now, as you've been talking, we've had a couple of your slides on the screen showing the location and the nature of the several different projects you have. But I want to segue from, well, actually, before I do that, let me back up. You're talking about going into potentially a 2 million pound run rate or near that by the end of 2025. Now, that may, of course, be by virtue of the fact that the president, as you and I are recording this, has not actually signed this yet. But I was actually in Washington on the afternoon with some of the uranium people when the Senate, by acclamation, I guess, agreed to the House bill that was passed several months ago, and there is going to be basically a ban on imports of new Russian uranium, enriched uranium, and so forth. There's a couple of ifs, ands, or buts attached to that. But one of the open questions we have is, well, is Russia going to wait and be nice and fulfill the contracts that it has with U.S. utilities and others between now and 2028, or just say, well, if that's how you feel, get lost? Are you guys and the rest of the uranium industry in America ready to step in? I know that the U.S. for the first time in something like 70 years recently just produced its first HALEU product, enriched uranium. How do you see all this shaking out?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I mean, it's a long time coming. We've been working hard on this. Right after Russia invaded Ukraine, we were pretty quick to impose lots of sanctions on Russia and ban the import of oil and gas and coal and a whole host of other commodities. But it's taken well over 2 years to ban Russian uranium imports. Now, I will say, look, I wish it would have happened a lot sooner, but over the last 2 years, I'll have to commend domestic utilities. They've been shifting their portfolios pretty aggressively because I think they've seen the writing on the wall. And so they better be ready for that time when a Russian uranium ban comes into place. And honestly, I think that's probably one of the things that spurred us to be able to sign some long-term contracts ourselves with U.S. utilities. And certainly other companies have been signing contracts, including UR Energy and Encore Energy and whatnot. And so, at a very basic level, look, we're not sending money to Russia to fund their war machine. I mean, we were sending $500 million to $1 billion per year to Russia, and at the same time funding Ukraine. That was a bit of a perverse situation. Now that has stopped. And I'd say, and so I think that it's gonna create some impetus for some increased uranium prices for non-Russian uranium. Now that doesn't just mean U.S. uranium, but it means it would mean Canadian and Australian, U.S. Allied uranium. I don't know the specific portfolios of all the utilities, but I think that there are some that are going to be scrambling a little bit, and maybe some traders that will be scrambling a little bit to replace that material. I think most importantly, it's unlocked this $2.7 billion to increase domestic conversion and enrichment capacity, which is really important, and that's going to be I think a big indirect benefit to uranium miners like us. There's been a bottleneck right now in Western uranium conversion and Western enrichment. No matter how much demand there is for non-Russian enriched uranium, they can only take so much of the U3O8 that we produce because of those bottlenecks. So this is going to help debottleneck that whole process. It's going to enable the Western converters to, let's say, first access more of their existing capacity, and hopefully in the future, expand that capacity. You've seen conversion and enrichment prices increase by 8, 10, 12x over the last 3 to 5 years. Uranium prices have done well, but they've gone up maybe 3x. And so I think that this debottlenecking could create some more upward pressure on our product. So I think it's a really important move. We of course support it, and we look forward to the president signing that bill.
Well, I've said many times, including in a uranium-centric issue of mine, which is going to be out concurrently with this particular discussion. If you folks out there watching this don't happen to be on my email list, make sure you get on it. You'll see it. I go into a lot more of the backdrop of what Curtis just mentioned and the broader dynamics of the uranium and nuclear energy space. So we won't spend any more time on that here because we want to focus on energy fuels. And that said, Curtis, one of the other unique attributes of your White Mesa mill is not that it's just not that it's a conventional ore processor when everything else is ISR, but the White Mesa mill also has the ability to be part of the processing of rare earth elements. Exactly. And that's something that you've really launched in the last few years as a focus of the company, to have Energy Fuels, not just a uranium company, though you're still a big player, but a broader company that's going to service a few different needs in the economy of the future. So tell us a bit about how you decided to, I don't know if pivot is the right word, but to get deeper into that area.
Yeah, I mean, during the dark days of the uranium industry, when I first met you, Chris, it was tough out there, and so what we had this asset, and we've recognized the strategic nature of this asset, and people in the industry recognize that as well. And so we started just looking at other ways to leverage that infrastructure, the licenses, our expertise, the equipment, everything that we have out there. And we've started to realize that the White Mesa Mill, even though it is, and it will continue to be a conventional uranium mill, it's also a platform for producing other critical minerals. And the one that really jumped to the front was rare earth elements. It became known to us, and this is probably 5 or 6 years ago now, that pretty much every single rare earth bearing mineral, when you dig it up out of the ground, is naturally radioactive. Right alongside the rare earths in those minerals, you also have uranium and thorium and other radioactive elements that are bound up in that mineral. And so, whenever you start processing and concentrating rare earth elements, you start concentrating uranium and thorium and some of these other things. And honestly, if you look back at the history of rare earth element production, that is something that has gotten almost everybody all tangled up. All the big names, they have had issues with the radioactive component of rare earth element processing. So we started to realize, well, shoot, we have a uranium mill. That's what we do. I mean, honestly, it's kind of weird. And we mention this to people kind of raise their eyebrows, and it's hard to get your head around, but the more uranium, the better for us.
Well,
because
sure.
we can recover it.
Well, and let me interject something here, because this is something, despite their name, and I think you can confirm this, rare earth elements, and of course there are many of them that have specialized needs in some cases, they're not that rare. I mean, they're everywhere.
They are.
It's like lithium. Everybody in the recent past, it was fashionable before the market fell apart again for a while. Everybody decided, well, we have lithium. Well, I can go out in the sand in my backyard here in Florida and probably find a little lithium, most assuredly find some rare earth elements.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't mean they're any good, doesn't mean they're economical, doesn't mean I can use them. So you make an important point with the White Mesa Mill, is that the issue that a lot of even miners have had, what do we do with this product? How do we process this stuff, especially when, as with so many other things, with uranium, it was more Russia. With rare earth processing, it's been chiefly China. So what do we do with this? And you guys are providing the answer for that.
That's exactly right. Well, honestly, it's kind of funny. Yeah, even in Florida where you are, you go out and pick up some sand or whatever, you'll probably find uranium in it too, by the way, because that's quite common. I mean, look, these are very common elements. Uranium, thorium, rare earths, they actually are all fairly common in the Earth's crust. But the trick is, how do you find, economic deposits that have high concentrations? And then again, when it comes to rare earth elements, and you start processing this stuff, what do you do with the waste products? And so for most rare earth processors, it's the uranium and thorium as a waste product. And in fact, for most of them, it's a penalty. It's a problem for them. And so, but again, doing this at a conventional uranium mill just makes all the sense in the world. And what's really unique is that we've been able to unlock what is really widely considered to be the best rare earth bearing mineral out there. It's called monazite. Monazite has a number of advantages over other rare earth bearing minerals. It has kind of the perfect concentrations of the magnet rare earths, the NdPr and the Tb and the Dy. Those are the particular rare earths that are needed for these permanent magnets, used in electric vehicles, used in wind energy, used in military and defense technologies, used in a whole host of technologies. But the problem with monazite, quote unquote, is that it has more uranium and more thorium bound up with it. And so a lot of rare earth companies have really shied away from monazite, even though it's superior in pretty much every other way. But again, for us, the more uranium, the better. Because we can recover it and monetize it and sell it into the nuclear industry. So
it's not a penalty for you.
No, it's a benefit. It's a benefit. And so but then monazite is a big part of China's dominant rare earth supply chains. China, being ahead of the game as they often are, they realized that this monazite comes off as a byproduct of heavy mineral sand mining. And that monazite was actually a problem for those miners because, again, it's radioactive. So those heavy mineral sand guys that are primarily going after titanium and zirconium, They have to blend it back in, put it back in the pit, do something with it, send it to a hazardous waste facility or something. Well, China came to them and said, hey, we'll buy that monazite off of you. We'll buy your tailings off of you, turn that liability into an asset. And those guys just jumped at the opportunity. They said, great, we can get rid of this crap. Okay. And China was like, oh, sweet, a nice, cheap source of rare earth elements. Sure. So essentially we came in and decided to do the same thing. Now, when there was some competition on the line for that monazite flowing into China, the price of monazite went from a few $100s per ton on the open market to, geez, I think it hit like $15,000 per ton at some point. Wow. They wanted those molecules to continue flowing into China, so they just raised up the price, realizing they'd make it all up on the downstream and the metals, the magnets, the EV motors, all those products. So that's when we as a company realized we need to own our own heavy mineral sand deposits. And so we've been spending the last year and a half acquiring mineral sand deposits that have high concentrations of monazite to feed into our rare earth initiatives. While at the same time, these mineral sand mines, that's a whole other really nice business just on its own. It's kind of an industrial material business, really. Good margins, good cash flows long term. It's a little boring, but if you're trying to create a long-term, sustainable, cash flow generating, high margin company, it's not a bad thing to have in your pocket.
Well, this probably isn't the most direct analogy, but you and I were talking before we recorded, and I mentioned when Cameco, which everybody recognizes them as well, first and foremost as a uranium miner and producer, they decided that they wanted to go in halves and buy Westinghouse. Yeah. For the technology for small modular reactors and some other utility applications and whatnot down the road. And at first, the market kind of rebelled against that. They wanted a sexy but simple and straightforward uranium story, because everybody was getting hot on uranium at long last, not realizing that this makes long-term Cameco a better company. And since then, I think a lot of that confusion has gone away, and Cameco has been rewarded a bit more, as it should, I think, with everybody else in this space. So you guys have kind of suffered the same way a bit in the recent past, from especially the last acquisition, and you and I traded some emails on that so that I could understand what was going on. But run us through that, because on the surface, when you go to different parts of the world and acquire these projects, you say, okay, well, is there geographic risk? Is there country risk? Is there going to be risk in shipping and so forth? Or is this such a great story, and you guys, at least in the US, have the market cornered so much with your mill that it's worth it to get this material and be able to bring it to us?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, whether you're Cameco, and again, I think that was a smart acquisition on their part, we're playing the long game, right? And I'm not saying that we're anywhere near this, nor do we necessarily want to be. But if you look at the large, diversified mining companies, the Rio Tintos of the world, the Barricks, the BHPs, the Freeports, those kinds of companies, they are diversified. They don't have just exposure to a single commodity. And some of these, just simply being in the uranium space, that's a wonderful space to be in. But historically, it's been highly cyclical, where you have some big upswings in the price for a couple of years, and then it drops back. Now, I do think that there are a lot of reasons to believe that could be different this time, that we really have leveled up a couple of levels in uranium prices, and it's finally starting to have a more rational pricing there. But it's a little risky to be exposed to a single commodity. There's a lot of things that can knock that price back down. Rare earth elements, again, similarly cyclical, right? But it's unrelated to uranium. So again, it just gives you the opportunity to have good margins, good cash flows on a sustainable basis. And then honestly, this heavy mineral sand business, it's a lot more stable. It doesn't go through quite the gyrations that rare earths and uranium and vanadium go through. And so to have that just as sort of a nice baseline kind of a business is pretty exceptional. Now, like this latest acquisition of Base Resources, now we just announced it. We have not closed on it yet. Hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, we'll be closed on it by this, late summer, early fall kind of a time frame. But what was unique about that is that this Toliara project that they have in Madagascar, it is widely considered among everybody in the heavy mineral sand business to be just in a class by itself. In terms of size, scale, longevity, the quality of the products that will come off of this mine, it's just a class by itself heavy mineral sand deposit. It has a lot of value just for its titanium and zirconium minerals. But then if you put the monazite component onto it, that doubles the value from $1 billion to a $2 billion NPV. And then our company's ability to take that monazite and turn it into separated rare earth oxides really supercharges these valuations. So like I think when we first spoke, you maybe had some questions about the premium we paid for base. First off, I think base was dramatically undervalued just because they had this project in Kenya that is running out. And I think there were big questions about how they were actually going to successfully move from their Kenya operations to the Madagascar operations. But we solve a lot of those problems for that company, and we can unlock that value, I think, in a way nobody else can. Honestly, in mining, you can hardly go wrong by buying the best asset in the world.
Yeah, that is true.
And that's what we're doing at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, you look at examples of Freeport with their long-running high-grade copper and gold mine in Indonesia. You look at once upon a time the old Home State gold mine. If you've got the best, it's gonna be there for a long time, arguably. Well, I'll be anxious to see how all of this plays out. I can't agree with you more that when you've got the kind of an asset that you do in the White Mesa Mill, you need to exploit it. And so, but by now then, assuming this closes as planned, are you going to be pretty much at capacity at White Mesa with all the irons you got in the fire?
Yeah, I think that between Toliara, base, we also announced this joint venture on a project in Australia with a company called Astron and the Donald project. Again, another heavy mineral sand project with a big monazite component. We have this project that we picked up last year in Brazil. Between those three projects, that's on the order at full capacity. That's on the order of about 45,000 metric tons of monazite per year. We're designing the White Mesa Mill to process up 50 to 60,000 tons per year. So we're pretty much there. And I think we're going to continue buying, we hope, monazite from Chemours out of Florida and Georgia, your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
There's other opportunities to possibly offtake other monazite, but that's plenty. I mean, that amount of monazite will put us on the order of a Lynas or an MP Materials in terms of their plans for producing NdPr oxide. And also, we're probably going to have more and better distributions of the heavy rare earths that are needed out there for these magnets, but also for military and defense purposes. Right. Monazite is just look, if you go back over the 50, 60, 70-year history of the rare earth industry, monazite was kind of the main game globally over that period, just because it's just a wonderful rare earth mineral. And it's got a lot of advantages over some of the others.
Neat. Well, I'll tell you, I've even been catching up in the recent past with just how big a player you're getting to be in this space. I think it's impressive going forward because everybody hears about this. China has blocked now technologies on these things from the U.S. So you guys have already got what you need, and you're pretty much the only player doing everything that you do. So,
I mean, if we are successful in executing, we're not there yet. I mean, believe me, we have a lot of work to do. Okay. But we have the potential to be, the largest, or if not one of the largest rare earth oxide producer ex-China. We have the ability to possibly be one of the biggest heavy mineral sand miners in the world. So titanium, zirconium minerals primarily, ilmenite, rutile, zircon, those kinds of things. The biggest uranium producer in the United States and the biggest primary vanadium producer in the United States. And we haven't even talked about medical isotopes, which is kind of a fascinating thing we're doing.
Well, yeah,
that's big too.
I actually wanted to wrap up with that because some people who follow the company know that for quite a while, along with uranium, you have produced some amounts of vanadium. When the price has been up, you sell it. When it's not, you stockpile it until the price recovers. But I got to confess that the radioisotope is a new one on me.
Yeah. So it boils down to this. There are some new cancer treatments that are being developed right now. They're actually going into human trials, which, look, this is what people are telling us is that they are literally showing promise as a cure for advanced cancers. The first person to be actually treated with this, it was sort of under a palliative care kind of a situation. There was a gentleman in Germany about 2016 or 2017, advanced prostate cancer, stage 4, spread all over his body. He had probably weeks to live, and they said at this point, go do whatever you want to do. And he was one of the first human trials of this targeted alpha therapy, and he was cured. Cancer-free, alive today. Some of these other short half-life alpha emitting elements that are needed for these drugs. So for instance, our Pinyon Plain mine has a few kilograms of radium spread throughout the deposit. And if we can recover a half a kilogram, a couple of kilograms of that radium, the value there is quite staggering. So, I mean, look, radium prices are millions of dollars per gram. That's the scale of what we're talking about here. Now, we're a long way from recovering radium. Radium is highly radioactive. We have to make sure that the safety is dialed in. We don't want to expose our workers to, look, that's what killed Marie Curie. I mean, radium has a long sordid history, right? But we do have an R&D license with the state of Utah to recover, I think, up to 100 milligrams of radium, just for R&D purposes, also to be able to supply some of these pharmaceutical companies with R&D quantities of radium so they can get through FDA and other regulatory approvals. But again, this is just this phenomenal opportunity that if it comes to fruition, could just be billions of dollars of revenue for us every year. So, I mean, again, like our general counsel, David Friedland, he often uses this analogy. It's sort of like you're walking down the street, you're going to, the uranium store or whatever you want to say, and you look down and, hey, there's $10,000 laying on the sidewalk. Do you pick it up or not?
Sure you do.
And that's what we're doing.
Wow.
So
that's wow. That's a cool story. I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that realize that radioactive substances of different kinds have always played a role in medicine of one kind
yes.
or another. But the fact that you guys may have this as I don't know if you can call it a byproduct with those kind of numbers.
It's a byproduct, yeah. Well, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. So,
well, honestly, look, the Pinyon Plain could have far more value as a radium mine versus a uranium mine.
Wow.
Believe it or not. So again, this is not, we're nowhere close to that at this point, but
yeah,
we should, we're definitely pursuing it. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you are. And as you pursue that, you got a great bread and butter business with uranium and rare earths and with vanadium. And it's one where you've been able to, not only did you weather the storm back when of the long bear market in uranium, now you're starting to reap some of the rewards as things have turned around. You guys have got positive cash flow. You've got positive net earnings in the recent past. And any particular, before we let you go, Curtis, any particular mileposts we should be looking for with the balance of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly tracking uranium markets. We've been active in the spot market. And so, hopefully we have some opportunities to sell some more uranium on the spot here in the rest of the year. Look for the closing of the Astron/Donald deal, the closing of the base deal. We're putting out more, numbers about what our rare earth business is going to look like. I think it's just full speed ahead and we just got to execute. That's what we're doing right now.
And I think somewhere in the near term too, to correct me if I'm wrong, there's going to be another sale for the strategic reserve as a part of this whole thing, or is that still up in the air?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I don't think that there's going to be any purchases for the strategic uranium reserve that we're hearing about. But at the end of the day, that's just another source of demand, and prices are good. So whether we sell it to the government or to a domestic utility, it's same as far as we're concerned.
Yeah.
And again, I think that the other thing to really look out for is what does the Russian uranium ban do for uranium prices? What does some of these issues in Kazakhstan with sulfuric acid and their production potential, those are real. We understand. As things ramp up and everybody says that, hey, we're going to get this mine started or that mine started, the history is fraught with projects that fail to meet expectations or fail altogether, and issues with ramp up and financing and development and all that stuff. So no, we could be in the early days of a nice little uranium spike here, but we're very, very well positioned to take advantage right now.
Well, you certainly are. And folks, that's a good opportunity for me to remind you again, if you're not already on my mailing list, make sure you get on it. I talk about some of these things in my current uranium issue where it concerns Kazakhstan, even Cameco a while back. I mean, you had the two biggest producers in the world say, uh-oh, X number of million pounds just went south. We thought we were going to produce this year, and now for this reason or that reason we can't do it. So it's still, even after, if you look at the spot price, Curtis, we were $18 or thereabouts. We saw the spot price over 100. It fell back to 80. As you and I are recording this, it's back up in the low to mid 90s. And still, long term, you've got to love the supply demand setup for uranium.
Oh, good. It's unbelievable. Yep. Yeah. And like I said, if you go back, say 5 or 6 years, the price hit, $17, $18 per pound back in 16. But if you go back in the last 5 or 6 years, uranium's gone up 3x, but conversion enrichment, that's gone up like 8, 10, 12x. There's no reason to believe that couldn't happen with uranium as well. So
I'm convinced that it will, and we'll all enjoy the ride if we're correct. So again, folks, take a look at Energy Fuels. It is a far deeper and more complex, in a good way, company than maybe you remembered or realized. It should be, in my opinion, a core holding in your portfolio if you like the uranium and rare earth spaces especially. And boy, if that radium kicker comes in, we'll all be doing handsprings and somersaults, I think.
Not tomorrow, but hey.
Not tomorrow, but maybe someday. That'd be a cool story. That'd be a cool story.
It would really be. Yeah. What a way to, I guess, sort of right off into the sunset in my career, sort of providing the raw materials for cancer cures.
No kidding. That'd be awesome. Well, Curtis, thank you much. And I'll look forward to the next time our paths cross in person again.
Yep. Sounds good. Appreciate it, Chris.
Take care.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.